"Don't leave me alone. I'll give you a life you never expected," said Apache woman to giant cowboy. The sun hung low over the dusty town, painting the streets and buildings in shades of orange and gold. The small western town looked almost empty, except for a few townsfolk going about their daily chores. Children ran in the dirt streets, chasing one another with laughter that echoed against the wooden walls of the shops. Horses stamped and whinnied outside the saloon and general store, the occasional clatter of a bucket or a cartwheel punctuating the quiet. Despite the apparent calm, a feeling of tension lingered in the air, like something was about to happen. Into this quiet town walked a figure that immediately drew attention, a giant of a man, taller and broader than most anyone around. His boots thudded against the wooden planks as he moved toward the saloon. His hat was pulled low, shadowing a rugged face marked with the lines of a hard life. Dust clung to his worn clothes, evidence of long days on the road. The townspeople stopped mid-step to watch him. Some whispered, others just stared in awe, unsure whether to be curious or wary. There was something about him, something that spoke of strength, of experience, and perhaps of trouble. Inside the saloon, the clinking of glasses and low murmur of conversation momentarily paused as the giant cowboy entered. He moved slowly, eyes scanning the room, every movement deliberate. He approached the bar and ordered a drink, his voice deep and calm. The bartender, a thin man with a streak of gray in his hair, poured him a glass of whiskey without a word. The other men in the saloon gave him wide berth, sensing that this was a man who did not want to be disturbed, or perhaps a man who could be dangerous if provoked. The cowboy sipped his drink quietly, observing the room with a practiced eye. Meanwhile, on the outskirts of town, a woman was watching. She ran a small trading post, a wooden structure surrounded by barrels, sacks, and a few animals tethered outside. She was an Apache woman, strong and confident, with eyes that missed nothing. Her hair was dark and long, often pulled back to keep it out of her face while she worked. She had grown up in this land, learning to survive in ways that the townfolk would never understand. Her life had been shaped by loss and struggle, but also by resilience. She understood danger and she respected strength, but she also knew when to act, when to wait, and when to speak. That afternoon, the woman noticed the cowboy as he walked through the marketplace. He moved slowly but purposefully, his presence impossible to ignore. She watched from behind a stack of barrels, curious about this man who seemed out of place yet unafraid. There was a tension in him, a quiet sadness that he tried to hide but could not entirely conceal. She felt an unusual pull, an instinct that told her this man was more than he seemed. She decided to approach him. When their eyes met, there was a brief, charged silence. The woman stepped forward, her boots making a soft crunch on the dirt. "Don't leave me alone," she said suddenly, her voice firm but calm. "I'll give you a life you never expected." The cowboy froze. The words were unexpected, almost startling. He looked down at her, his expression guarded, unsure if she was serious or if this was some kind of trick. He had learned long ago not to trust easily. Life had taught him that people often promised more than they could give, or that their promises came with hidden costs. But there was something different about her. Her eyes were steady, confident, and sincere. For a moment, he saw not a stranger, but someone who might understand him in a way that very few could. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice low and cautious. "I'm someone who's learned to survive," she replied, a hint of a smile on her lips. "And I think you need more than survival. I think you need a life." The cowboy was silent. He took another sip of his drink, the amber liquid warming him, as if giving him courage to respond. A life? He asked, still unsure. I've never known anything like that. That's why I said you'll never expect it, she said simply. Her words were like a spark in the quiet afternoon, a promise of something new, something uncertain but tempting. She could see the struggle in his eyes, the mixture of skepticism, curiosity, and a faint glimmer of hope. He was a man shaped by hardship, a man who had seen too much and trusted too little. Yet somehow her words had pierced the walls he had built around himself. They walked together through the marketplace, the townsfolk watching from a distance, whispering among themselves. Some were suspicious of the woman's boldness, others fascinated by the unusual pairing. The cowboy remained mostly quiet, observing her with careful attention. She seemed different from anyone he had ever met, not just in appearance, but in the way she carried herself, in the quiet authority in her voice, and in the calm confidence of her movements. As they talked, she shared a little about herself. She spoke of the land she had grown up on, of the people she had lost, and of the way she had learned to navigate a world that was often harsh and unfair. She spoke honestly, without embellishment or complaint, and he listened. He found himself drawn to her strength, to the way she faced life head-on, without fear or apology. There was a raw honesty in her that he had rarely encountered, and it unsettled him in a way that was strangely comforting. By the time the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the town, they had formed a tentative understanding. Neither spoke of the future, and neither made promises beyond the moment. Yet there was an unspoken connection between them, a sense that their meeting was no accident. For the first time in years, the cowboy felt something stirring within him, an unfamiliar feeling of curiosity, of hope, and perhaps of possibility. That evening, as the streets emptied and the town settled into a quiet calm, the Apache woman returned to her trading post. The cowboy lingered near the edge of town, watching the fading light, thinking about the words she had spoken. He had spent so long wandering, surviving from day to day, that he had almost forgotten the idea of life itself, of connection, trust, and belonging. Her words lingered in his mind, a quiet invitation to step into something new, something he could not yet imagine but could not ignore. He did not know what lay ahead. He did not know if he could trust her, or if the life she offered would be as different and extraordinary as she promised. But for the first time in a long while he felt a flicker of anticipation, a sense that maybe, just maybe, he had found a reason to stay, a reason to step out of the shadows of his past. The town slept under a sky full of stars, and the two of them, so different, yet drawn together by circumstance and fate, prepared unknowingly for the journey that was about to begin. That one conversation, simple yet profound, had set into motion a story neither of them could yet fully comprehend, and though the cowboy remained guarded, he carried with him a quiet thought that would not leave. Perhaps life could be more than survival. Perhaps it could be extraordinary. The next morning, the town awoke under a soft, pale sunlight that made the wooden buildings gleam faintly. The streets were quiet, save for the occasional clatter of a cartwheel or the low neighing of horses. The giant cowboy moved slowly through the marketplace again, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust. Though he had spent the night wandering his thoughts, he could not shake the memory of the Apache woman's words, "I'll give you a life you never expected." Those words echoed in his mind as if they carried more weight than any warning or threat he had ever heard. The Apache woman, on her side, was busy tending to her trading post. She sorted sacks of flour, checked the barrels of corn, and occasionally called to a passing customer. Yet she kept stealing glances toward the road where she had first seen him. There was something about him, beyond his size and presence. He carried the kind of quiet strength that spoke of experience, resilience, and yet loneliness. She sensed a man who had seen too much but had not completely given up on life. That was rare, and it drew her attention. By mid-morning, the cowboy finally approached her trading post. He stood at the edge, his large frame casting a long shadow on the dirt ground. The woman noticed him immediately and did not flinch. Instead, she offered a small, welcoming smile. "You came back," she said, almost as if she had expected him. "I did," he replied quietly, his deep voice calm but cautious. "I didn't know if I should." "You don't have to decide today," she said. "Just see what this place has to offer. Maybe it's different from what you know." He nodded slowly, scanning the trading post. There were simple supplies for everyday life: cloth, tools, dried foods, and a few handmade goods. Beyond that, there were animals tethered nearby: horses, a couple of goats, and some chickens pecking at the ground. But more than the material things, there was something in the way she managed her place that spoke of independence and careful planning. It was the kind of life that required thought, skill, and courage, and she ran it all on her own. "Do you always work alone?" he asked. "Most of the time," she said, her eyes meeting his. "I have to. Not many people understand the land, the animals, or the townsfolk the way I do. You have to be careful. Life here doesn't wait for anyone." He nodded, again, understanding more than she realized. Life had not been easy for him either, though in a different way. He had wandered from town to town, taking on work when he could, keeping his distance from others. He had learned to survive, but trust had become almost impossible. Yet something about her made him want to listen, to try, and maybe even to believe. Their day passed quietly at first. The cowboy helped her move barrels and stack supplies. He had strong, capable hands, and though he was unfamiliar with the details of running a trading post, he adapted quickly. She observed him closely, impressed with his skill and care, though she made no comment. For a man who had lived alone, he was surprisingly gentle with the animals, feeding the horses with a quiet patience. During a brief pause in work, she handed him a cup of water. "You need to eat something too," she said. "You can't help me if you're starving." "I've managed before," he said, shrugging, though a small smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "And maybe you'll manage better with someone helping you," she replied, a hint of teasing in her voice. The cowboy chuckled quietly, a sound that was rare and unfamiliar to the townfolk who had only seen him as a quiet, imposing figure. Just as the sun reached its peak, a commotion rose from the far end of the town. A group of men appeared on horseback, dust rising behind them as they rode in. Their faces were hard, and their eyes were sharp with the promise of trouble. The townsfolk froze, unsure whether to run or hide. It was clear these men were not here to trade. The cowboy instinctively moved closer to the woman, a protective stance taking over. "They're bandits," she said quietly, her tone steady despite the tension. "They come through these parts from time to time looking for easy targets." The cowboy's eyes narrowed. He had faced trouble before, and he could sense that these men were dangerous.
He looked at the woman. "What should we do?" he asked, though part of him already knew.
"We protect the town. We protect the post," she replied. "And we survive, like we always do." Together they prepared. She gathered supplies, moved animals to safer areas, and positioned herself where she could see the approach of the riders. The cowboy took a place nearby, quietly checking the barrels and tools, making sure they could be used if necessary. There was a rhythm to their movements, a silent understanding that this was more than work. It was survival, and it required both of them. When the bandits rode in, demanding supplies and money, the cowboy stepped forward. His presence alone was enough to make some of the men hesitate. He was a giant among them, and there was a calm, controlled force in the way he held himself. The Apache woman remained close, her eyes sharp, ready to act. She had faced danger before and knew how to read people quickly. The standoff was tense. Words were exchanged, threats thrown back and forth, but neither side made the first violent move. The cowboy's calm voice cut through the shouting. "You won't take what isn't yours," he said firmly. "Leave now, and no one gets hurt." For a moment it seemed the bandits might leave, but then one of the men grew impatient and tried to grab supplies from the post. The cowboy reacted instantly, placing himself between the man and the goods. He moved with a controlled strength that made it clear he would not back down. The Apache woman acted simultaneously, using her knowledge of the land and the position of the buildings to her advantage. She blocked the man's path, forcing him to stop. Seeing the determination of both, the bandits realized this would not be easy. They exchanged worried glances, then slowly backed away, leaving the town in silence once more. The townsfolk, who had watched from behind windows and corners, began to whisper in amazement. No one had expected the town's salvation to come from the unlikeliest of allies, a giant cowboy and a lone Apache woman working together. After the danger passed, the woman and the cowboy took a moment to breathe. The cowboy's expression was calm, but inside he felt something stir, a connection he had not expected. He had faced danger alone before, but now, beside her, he felt a sense of partnership, of trust, even if it was new and fragile.
"You handled that well," she said, a slight smile on her face. "Most people would have panicked. And you," he replied, "knew exactly what to do."
"You weren't afraid." She shrugged lightly. "Fear doesn't help anyone. You act, or you don't survive." Her words were simple but carried weight. He looked at her and realized that survival alone was not enough. Perhaps there was more to life than just existing. Perhaps there was strength in connection, in trust, in facing challenges together. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon again, they returned to the trading post. The cowboy helped secure the animals, and she checked the supplies. Their movements were quiet but coordinated, like two people learning to work together for the first time, but already understanding the rhythm of each other. There was a sense of companionship forming, even without words. By the evening, the cowboy sat on a small wooden crate outside the trading post, staring at the horizon. The Apache woman joined him, settling beside him quietly. For a long time, neither spoke. "I don't help it." They watched the colors of the sunset shift from orange to pink to deep purple. There was a comfort in the silence, a growing recognition that perhaps they could face the future together, whatever it might hold. "I didn't expect to meet someone like you," the cowboy said finally, breaking the silence. "Neither did I," she replied. "But sometimes life surprises you." He nodded slowly, understanding. Life had been full of hardships, full of roads that led nowhere, full of moments of loneliness and doubt. But now, beside her, he felt something new, a possibility, a promise, and perhaps even hope. He realized that maybe the life she had spoken of, the life he had never expected, was not just about safety or survival, but about partnership, trust, and the courage to step into something unknown together. The stars began to appear in the night sky, shining brightly above the quiet town. The two sat together, two unlikely companions in a world full of uncertainty, yet already bound by trust, respect, and the unspoken understanding that the journey ahead, though uncertain, could be extraordinary. And for the first time in a long time, the cowboy allowed himself to believe in that possibility. The morning sun rose slowly, casting a soft, golden light over the small town. The streets were quiet again, but there was a different feeling in the air. The giant cowboy had stayed at the trading post the night before, and the Apache woman had welcomed him with a careful but steady trust. It was unusual for someone like him to stay in one place, yet he had chosen to remain, drawn by something he could not yet understand. The day began with routine tasks, but the air between them had shifted. There was a quiet understanding in the way they moved together, a rhythm that seemed natural despite the short time they had known each other. The cowboy carried supplies, stacked barrels, and even helped feed the animals. She watched him closely, noticing the way he worked, not hurried, not careless, but thoughtful and deliberate. There was skill in his hands, a patience he rarely showed, and it reminded her that strength could also be gentle. "You're good with your hands," she remarked as he adjusted a barrel that had tipped slightly. "I've had to be," he replied. But his voice was calm but carried a weight of experience. Life doesn't give you many chances to learn slowly. She nodded, understanding more than he could know. She had also learned to adapt, to survive, and to act carefully in every situation. "And yet, you survive," she said. "That counts for something." For a while they worked side by side in silence. The sounds of the town were distant. Horses whinnying, a wagon on a far street, children laughing somewhere down the road. Here in the trading post, there was a bubble of quiet, where two people began to see each other clearly for the first time. Finally, the cowboy spoke, breaking the silence. "I've been running for a long time," he said, his eyes distant. "From towns, from people, from my own mistakes. I didn't think I could ever stop." She looked at him, sensing the truth in his words. "We all have our pasts," she said softly. "Some parts we carry longer than others. But staying doesn't make you weak. It makes you brave." He shifted slightly, unsure how to respond. Her words were simple, yet they struck a chord he hadn't felt in years. It was rare for anyone to see him, not just his size or his strength, but the man beneath it, the man who had been shaped by loss, loneliness, and regret. Here he felt seen, and it both comforted and frightened him. The day continued peacefully at first, but as the sun climbed higher, a sudden noise broke the calm. A scream came from the edge of town, sharp and urgent. Both of them reacted immediately. The cowboy's long experience in danger made him move fast, his large frame almost silent despite his size. The woman grabbed a small rifle and moved toward the sound, her eyes scanning for threats. They found a young boy trapped near the riverbank, his foot caught between two rocks as the water slowly rose. He was terrified, unable to free himself. Without hesitation, the cowboy knelt down and carefully lifted the boy free, while the woman guided him to safety. The boy's mother ran up, tears in her eyes, thanking them both over and over. "That was fast thinking," the woman said once the family had left. "You didn't hesitate." "I've had practice," he replied, brushing dust from his coat. "You don't survive long without learning to act quickly." The incident brought them closer. They shared a quiet moment afterward, sitting by the trading post, letting the adrenaline fade. The cowboy realized he could trust her judgment, and she realized he was more than just a giant presence. He was dependable, capable, and brave. The seeds of trust were growing, slowly but surely. Later that afternoon, as they rested, the woman decided to share more of her story. She had spoken little about her past before, only hints of hardship and survival. But now she began to reveal her history, of growing up on the land, of her family, and of the losses she had endured. She spoke of the harshness of the world she had grown in, and of the strength she had learned to carry. The cowboy listened intently. For the first time, he felt that he could let someone see his own past, his own struggles. He began to speak carefully, revealing moments he had never shared with anyone, the towns he had left behind, the mistakes he had made, and the loneliness he had carried for so long. It was not an easy conversation, and there were pauses, silences filled with heavy thought. Yet each story, each memory, drew them closer together. By evening they sat outside the trading post once more, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky turned shades of orange, pink, and deep purple, reflecting the quiet changes happening between them. Neither spoke for a long time, just sitting in the soft glow of twilight. The cowboy realized he had never felt this kind of peace with anyone. She had a calm strength, a quiet determination, and a warmth that drew him in despite his reservations. "You've been through a lot," he said finally, his voice low. "So have you," she replied, her eyes meeting his. "That's why we understand each other." Not everyone could. For the first time, he allowed himself to believe in connection. It was frightening because he had spent so long alone, but it was also comforting. He realized that perhaps life could offer more than survival, more than wandering from town to town. Perhaps it could offer trust, companionship, and a shared purpose. That night, a distant howl echoed through the desert, a reminder of the wildness surrounding them. It was a world that could be dangerous, unpredictable, and unforgiving. Yet in that moment, he did not feel alone. He felt part of something new, something fragile but real. The Apache woman had opened a door he had long thought closed, a door to hope, to trust, and to a life he had never expected. Over the next few days, they worked together more closely. The cowboy learned the routines of the trading post, helping her manage supplies, care for animals, and interact with the townsfolk. She, in turn, showed him how to read the land, how to notice the smallest details that could mean safety or danger. Each lesson, each shared task, strengthened their bond. They were learning not just to survive, but to work together, and in that they discovered mutual respect and understanding. One afternoon, a small fire broke out near the edge of the trading post, caused by a spark from a passing blacksmith. The cowboy acted quickly, grabbing a bucket of water and dousing the flames, while the woman used sand and dirt to ensure nothing spread. Their movements were seamless, almost instinctive. It was the first time they had faced danger together without hesitation, and it marked a turning point in their partnership. They were no longer two individuals surviving separately. They were a team, relying on one another, trusting one another, and beginning to understand the strength in that connection. That evening, after the sun had set and the sky was full of stars, they sat by a small fire outside the trading post. The cowboy, normally quiet and reserved, found himself speaking freely. "I've never stayed in one place for long," he admitted. "I've always been alone. I didn't think I could ever feel like this, like I belong somewhere." "You belong here," she said softly. "Not because of me, but because you've found a place where you can be yourself. That's rare. Most people never find it." Her words sank deep into him. He realized that she was not just offering him a life of safety or comfort, but a chance to heal, to belong, and to trust again. He felt a quiet warmth in his chest, a feeling he had not allowed himself in years. The night grew darker, and the fire crackled softly. They watched the stars, listening to the sounds of the desert, the distant howl of a coyote, the whisper of the wind through the trees, the soft breathing of the animals nearby. It was a moment of peace, fragile but real, and it marked a change in both of them. The cowboy understood that life was no longer about wandering alone, no longer about hiding from the past. It was about facing it, about learning to trust, and about discovering that life could be more than survival. It could be connection, purpose, and hope. And as he sat there, beside the Apache woman who had become his guide, his partner, and perhaps something more, he realized that the life she had promised was beginning to take shape, slowly, quietly, and beautifully. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of dust and dry grass. The giant cowboy woke early, as he usually did, sitting outside the trading post with his hat tipped back, staring at the horizon. The Apache woman was already moving about, tending to the animals and preparing supplies for the day. There was a sense of normalcy now, a rhythm to their lives that had slowly developed over the past days. Yet both of them knew that peace in a town like this was often temporary. Danger had a way of arriving when least expected. By mid-morning, the first warning arrived. A rider appeared on the distant ridge, silhouetted against the sun. At first it seemed like a lone traveler, but soon more riders appeared, riding in a line that stretched across the horizon. The cowboy's eyes narrowed as he recognized the shapes of men he had hoped never to see again. The gang he had once traveled with, men he had left behind years ago, were coming. They were dangerous, ruthless, and unafraid to use violence to get what they wanted. "They are here," he muttered, his deep voice low but steady. He did not panic, but a cold weight settled in his chest. Old friends of mine, or enemies, depending on how you see it. The Apache woman looked at him, concern clear in her eyes. "Who are they?" "People I used to ride with," he replied. "Men I've outgrown, or maybe escaped from. Either way, they don't forgive easily, and they don't forget. I knew this day might come, but I hoped it wouldn't be here." She studied the distant riders, her hand resting on the small rifle at her side. "Then we prepare," she said simply. "Whatever happens, we face it together." The cowboy nodded, appreciating her calmness. Together, they moved to fortify the trading post. Barrels were stacked to create barriers, supplies were moved inside, and animals were secured in the pens. The townsfolk, who had begun to trust the woman's strength and the cowboy's presence, offered what help they could. The air was thick with tension, but there was a sense of determination, an understanding that survival now depended on unity and strategy. As the gang approached, their leader, a tall, sharp-eyed man with a scar across his cheek, spurred his horse forward. "We know you're here," he shouted. "Give us what's ours, and maybe we'll leave you alive." The cowboy stepped forward, his massive frame casting a shadow across the dusty ground.
"You won't get anything," he said calmly, his voice carrying authority. "Leave now or you'll regret it." The leader sneered.
"You think you can stop us? You think one man, or one woman, can hold back men like us?" The Apache woman moved beside the cowboy, her eyes focused and steady. "Try us," she said, her tone unwavering. "We've faced worse." The first wave of the gang rode forward, testing the defenses. The cowboy acted quickly, using his size and strength to block the men's advances while keeping the townsfolk and the woman safe. He moved with precision, forcing the gang to back off repeatedly. The woman, drawing on her knowledge of the land and terrain, guided the townsfolk to positions where they could defend themselves. She was quick, strategic, and fearless, a leader in her own right. Despite their courage, the cowboy knew this fight would not be easy. The gang was experienced, and their leader was cunning. He could see the challenge in their eyes, the same challenge he had once faced in his own life. Memories of past raids, fights, and betrayals flashed before him. Yet, he did not let fear take hold. He had grown stronger, wiser, and he now had someone he could trust beside him. Together, they were a force the gang had not anticipated. Hours passed with tense standoffs, shouts, and the occasional clash of weapons. The cowboy and the woman moved with a silent understanding, anticipating each other's actions. It was the first time the cowboy had fought alongside someone who matched his instincts, who understood timing, and who could be relied upon completely. Each movement, each decision, strengthened their bond. The town itself seemed to hold its breath, watching these two unlikely defenders stand firm against a gang that had terrorized others for years. Finally, the leader of the gang grew frustrated. He spurred his horse forward, attempting a direct confrontation with the cowboy. But the cowboy anticipated the move, sidestepping with a strength and precision that forced the leader to retreat. The woman acted at the same moment, using the terrain to block the gang's approach and forcing them into positions where they could not act effectively. Together, the cowboy and the woman demonstrated coordination, trust, and bravery that surprised even the gang. As the sun began to set, the gang realized that victory was not theirs. Slowly, reluctantly, they began to retreat, riding back toward the distant hills from which they had come. The town exhaled a collective sigh of relief. The immediate danger had passed, but both the cowboy and the Apache woman knew that peace was fragile. The cowboy's past would not stay buried for long, and challenges would continue to arise. After the gang left, the woman moved closer to the cowboy. "You handled that well," she said, her voice calm but filled with admiration. "You didn't hesitate." "You are steady." He nodded, the weight of exhaustion showing on his face. "It's not just me," he replied. "You were incredible, too. I couldn't have done it alone." "I've learned that much in the past few days." There was a quiet moment between them. The cowboy looked out over the town, the dust settling around the streets and buildings. He realized that the life he had left behind, the wandering, the solitude, was no longer what he wanted. He had found something he had thought impossible, a place to belong, and someone to trust. The Apache woman, sensing his thoughts, placed a hand lightly on his arm. "This is just the beginning," she said softly. "We can face what comes next, together." Her words resonated deeply. The cowboy had lived with fear, doubt, and loneliness for too long. Now, beside her, he felt a strength he had not known before. He understood that life could be more than survival. It could be connection, courage, and purpose. And though the future remained uncertain, he was ready to face it, not alone, but with her by his side. The following days were quieter, but the tension lingered like a shadow. The cowboy knew that the gang might return, or that other threats could emerge. Yet, he also knew that the bond he had formed with the Apache woman would carry them through whatever challenges lay ahead. They continued their work at the trading post, caring for animals, managing supplies, and helping the townsfolk. Each task, each shared responsibility, strengthened their partnership. One evening after a long day, they sat together outside the trading post, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. The cowboy spoke quietly, his voice filled with thoughtfulness. "I never thought I could stay in one place," he admitted. "I thought the past would always catch up with me, but with you, it feels different. Like maybe I can finally put down roots." The woman smiled, a warmth in her eyes that reflected the firelight. "We all carry our pasts," she said softly, "but the future is something we can choose, and we choose it together." He looked at her, the words sinking in. He realized that she was not just offering safety or survival. She was offering a life he had never dared to imagine. A life filled with trust, respect, and shared purpose. And for the first time in years, he allowed himself to hope. The town settled into quiet once more, the threat gone for now. But the cowboy knew better than to let his guard down completely. He had faced his past and survived, and with the Apache woman by his side, he felt ready for whatever came next. He understood that challenges would continue, but he also understood that they could face them together. And in that realization, he found something he had long thought impossible: peace. As the night deepened and the stars shone brightly overhead, the two of them sat in companionable silence. They had faced danger, confronted the shadows of the past, and emerged stronger. And though the road ahead was uncertain, they were no longer alone. Together they were ready to face whatever life would throw at them, trusting in each other and in the bond they had formed. The morning sun rose gently over the quiet town, casting soft light over the streets and buildings. The trading post was calm, peaceful in a way it hadn't been before. The events of the past days, the bandits, the gang, and the constant tension, had left their mark, but they had also brought clarity. The giant cowboy and the Apache woman had faced challenges together and emerged stronger. The town had come to respect their courage and trust, and now a new sense of hope lingered in the air. The cowboy stood outside the trading post, stretching his large frame, feeling the warmth of the sun on his back. For the first time in years, he felt the simplicity of the moment, the quiet, the light, the calm, and he allowed himself to truly breathe. His life had been full of wandering, danger, and loss, but now, he realized, there was a different path ahead, one that he could choose, one that he could shape with the woman who had stood beside him through every challenge. The Apache woman approached, carrying a basket of freshly gathered vegetables. She set it down carefully, smiling at him. "It's a good day," she said softly, "and it feels like the beginning of something new." He nodded, looking out toward the horizon. "I never thought I'd see a day like this," he admitted. A day without fear, without running, without uncertainty. She looked at him with gentle understanding. "You don't have to run anymore. You've survived enough. Now it's time to live." The words struck him deeply. Living, not just surviving. That idea was foreign, yet incredibly appealing. He had spent so long on the move, avoiding both danger and connection, that he had forgotten what it felt like to belong. Yet here, beside her, he felt a pull he could not ignore. This was a chance at something real, something enduring, and he knew he could not let it pass. Over the following days, they began to rebuild parts of the trading post that had been damaged or worn over time. Together, they repaired fences, organized supplies, and even planted a small garden near the edge of the property. Their movements were seamless, a partnership built on trust, respect, and shared experience. Each task, no matter how small, was a step toward building a life that was theirs alone. One afternoon, a messenger arrived from a neighboring town. He carried news of travelers seeking supplies, people moving through the region, and even a few who had heard of the cowboy and the woman defending the town. It was clear that their efforts had not gone unnoticed. The cowboy and the Apache woman received the news with quiet pride, but they did not let it change the careful way they managed their work. Their focus remained on each other, on the town, and on the life they were slowly creating. As evening fell, they sat together outside the trading post, watching the sun sink behind the distant hills. The sky was a brilliant mix of colors, and the town was bathed in the gentle glow of twilight. For a long time, neither spoke. They simply sat, letting the quiet moments fill the space between them. In that silence, there was understanding, trust, and a deep sense of connection that words could not capture. Finally, the cowboy spoke, his voice quiet but steady. I never thought I'd find someone like you, he said. Someone who sees me, not just the size, not just the strength, but the man inside. You make me believe in something I thought I'd lost. The Apache woman reached out, placing her hand on his. And you make me believe that strength can be gentle, that courage can be shared, and that trust can grow even in the hardest places, she replied. Her voice was calm, yet filled with warmth and sincerity. For a moment, they simply held hands, the connection between them silent but powerful. The cowboy realized that he no longer feared the past or the uncertainty of the future. He had found a partner, a friend, and perhaps something deeper, a reason to stay, to invest in life, and to hope again. The following weeks were filled with quiet work, laughter, and small victories. The town began to rely on the trading post more than ever, and both of them took pride in the life they were building. The cowboy taught the townsfolk a few skills he had learned in his travels: how to handle horses, how to repair tools, and how to stay calm in tense situations. She shared her knowledge of the land, of plants, and of survival, teaching others how to read the signs of weather, track animals, and make the most of the resources around them. Through it all, their bond grew stronger. They shared meals, stories, and quiet evenings by the fire. The cowboy found himself laughing more, feeling a joy he had thought was long gone. The Apache woman noticed the change too, the way his eyes softened, the way he moved with less tension, and the way he seemed fully present in each moment. Together, they discovered that life was not just about surviving. It was about living, experiencing, and sharing. One evening, as they sat by the fire under a sky filled with stars, the cowboy spoke about his past once more. "I've done things I'm not proud of," he admitted. "I thought those mistakes would follow me forever. But now, with you, it feels like I can leave some of that behind." "You can," she replied. "Your past is a part of you, but it doesn't have to define the rest of your life."
We can choose what comes next.
Her words were simple, yet they carried profound meaning. For the first time, the cowboy felt that he could truly let go of the burdens he had carried for so long. He could embrace the life she had offered, a life of trust, companionship, and hope. The next morning, they decided to explore a nearby river, a small adventure to enjoy the freedom they had fought to protect. Walking side by side, they marveled at the beauty of the land, the gentle rustle of trees, the sparkling water, and the quiet songs of birds. It was a reminder that life could be gentle, beautiful, and full of wonder if one allowed it. As they reached the riverbank, the cowboy paused and looked at her. "I never thought I'd feel this, at peace," he said. "But being here with you, it feels right, like this is where I'm meant to be." She smiled, her eyes reflecting the sunlight on the water.
And you are.
"This is just the beginning. There's a life we can build together, and it's full of possibilities." They spent the afternoon by the river, fishing, talking, and simply enjoying each other's company. There was laughter, shared stories, and moments of quiet reflection. The cowboy realized that life had offered him something he had long thought impossible: a chance to belong, to trust, and to hope again. And he knew that this was just the start of a life filled with meaning, purpose, and connection. As the sun set, they returned to the trading post, their hearts light and their spirits renewed. The town was calm, the animals safe, and the trading post secure. For the first time in years, the cowboy felt that he had a home, not just a place to rest, but a place filled with trust, respect, and love. That night, under a blanket of stars, they sat by the fire once more. The cowboy turned to her, his expression soft but serious. "I don't know what the future holds," he said, But I know I want to face it with you." She placed her hand on his, a gesture of understanding and agreement. "And I with you," she replied. "Together we can face whatever comes." The two of them sat quietly, listening to the sounds of the night, the gentle whisper of the wind, the distant call of an owl, and the soft rustle of the animals nearby. In that moment, the world felt both vast and intimate, full of challenges yet filled with promise. They had faced danger, uncertainty, and the weight of the past, but now, side by side, they felt ready for anything. The cowboy realized that life was no longer about running, hiding, or fearing the unknown. It was about choosing trust, building connection, and embracing the unexpected joys that came with living fully. And as he looked at the Apache woman, he knew that she had given him the most important gift of all, a chance at a life he had never imagined, but had always secretly hoped for. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The trading post thrived, the town grew stronger, and their partnership deepened. They faced challenges together, celebrated small victories, and created a life filled with meaning. The cowboy no longer wandered. He stayed, not out of obligation, but because he wanted to. And the Apache woman, who had once walked alone, now had a partner she could rely on, trust, and care for.